Hello and welcome to this very special episode. This is part of a series called Empowering the Ecosystem presented by the Bank of Baroda in partnership with ET Now. A kind of series where we're looking at different sectors and I meet with thought leaders and experts from sectors who share their thoughts on what's happening in the sector, the challenges, the opportunities, and the way ahead for the same. Today we're talking about the MSME sector. Now it's a very important, very integral sector to India's economy, but one that has been unfortunately battered badly by the pandemic, whether it's problems of sales going down, migrant labor moving away, and of course, one concern that always troubles MSMEs is financing. But on the other side, the government has put in a lot of stimulus, a lot of packages. So today, I have with me an expert panel who will shed light on this and give us more information of what's happening on ground. Allow me to introduce them. First up, we have Mr. Vikramaditya Khichi. He's an executive director with Bank of Baroda. We have Manish Kothari. He's the president and business head, corporate banking for large corporates, MNC, SMEs, and new age companies at Kotak Mahindra Bank. We have Mr. VSV Rao, he's the Deputy Managing Director at SIDBI, and we have Mr. Animesh Saxena, he's the President of the Federation of Indian Micro and Small and Medium Enterprises. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion here. Mr. Khichi, I want to start off with you. Recently, the government came out with a very important, very good stimulus package for SMEs. But what are you seeing on ground? What's happening in this space?
Yeah, to answer that question, I think I'll step back a little and look at the entire ecosystem of MSMEs in the last 1.5 years. This particular sector has been in a little bit of stress, a little bit of problem for quite some time now. And that is why, if you recall, RBI came up with a dispensation of one-time restructuring for all those standard MSME accounts, which was standard on 1st of January 2019. And then this basically extended up to for all those accounts which are standard as of 1st January 2020. And it was only this pandemic when they struck that the coup de grace was delivered, and it really battered and took the life out of this MSME sector. But having said that, I think there a lot of been which is done at the ground zero for the betterment of MSMEs, and all stakeholders, including the government, the Reserve Bank of India, and all the banks and NBFCs, they have been taking due care to do as much as possible. Government on its part declaring some stimulus packages, Reserve Bank of India coming out with some liquidity measures to get some liquidity to the system, and banks also coming out with lots of dispensations like the moratorium, the standstill of asset classification, the emergency credit line which was declared, which was 10% of the working capital. All banks basically came out with that, and lots of reassessment of working capital requirements that were done, and one-time restructuring. There are lots of things which are basically being done at the grassroots level. And I think it has eased quite a bit of stress amongst the MSME, though I understand the sector is per se struggling to see the easing out of the things.
Very true. I'll go across to Mr. Rao now. So at SIDBI, how are you seeing things? What are some initiatives, some steps being taken at your end to help this ease the burden of the MSMEs?
All businesses have taken a hit. There is not a single industry which is an exception because of the lockdown which we have experienced in the past. But immediately after the lockdown has been lifted, the government has come out very quickly with stimulus packages, and the Reserve Bank of India also has played its part in coming out with liquidity programs to help the MSMEs. Coming to SIDBI, we have actually done several programs for providing financial support to MSMEs. We did have the liquidity support of around 15,000 crores allocated by the Reserve Bank of India to be extended to the MSMEs through the segments of banks, MFIs, and non-banking and NBFCs. So out of this 15,000 crores, as I speak today, an amount of around 13,000 and odd crores has already been sanctioned, and more than 10,000 crores have been dispersed, covering around 19 lakhs odd MSMEs. This is one particular scheme which has been implemented by SIDBI to help the MSMEs come out of their problems, whether it is their immediate liquidity problems or whether it is any other problem which they have been facing.
Mr. Kothari, now coming to you also from your angle, with your conversations with MSMEs, what's the sense that you're getting? What are some of the pain points? How are you at your end being able to help them?
I guess the two big things the two big positives which the MSMEs have seen lately, one is of course the emergency credit scheme which the government had launched. And I believe it's a fantastic scheme from the perspective of providing liquidity to MSMEs. 20% of their outstanding as of 29th of February. I guess 20% is a very, very reasonably good amount to take care of anywhere between 6 to 12 months, which any company may have to go through from the perspective of challenges of working capital. And close to about 50% of that has already been utilized in terms of sanctions. 1.5 lakh crores has already been sanctioned, almost in equal measure by public sector banks and private sector banks, which means that the participation is pretty, across, and close to about 2.37 million SMEs, which is about 52% of the number which one had expected out of the 4.5 million, have actually availed these schemes. The second, of course, important piece which the RBI had announced and which has been very, very helpful was the moratorium, which was the phase 1 and then followed by the phase 2. In my view, April, May, June was the toughest period for most of the people, as the lockdown was the severest at that point in time. As things started to open up, factories also started, and a whole host of things started moving in the economy. I guess extending it right up to August was also a very strong positive. And anyone who has been more impacted, those SMEs have really used the moratorium scheme as well to really take the benefit of cash flow impact, which otherwise in the normal course they would have had if they had to pay the interest or the installment.
Mr. Saxena, we've heard from the bankers. Now I need to get your perspective on this from the Federation, and you are obviously talking to MSMEs on a daily basis. Give us your opening note, your opinion.
Let me tell you briefly about the FISME. FISME, we are a federation for the SME associations pan-India, and we represent almost 750 SME associations. So our reach is in every corner of the country, and the ground report is not very encouraging. You see, if Mr. Kothari gave the figure of the number of units which have already availed, if you know the total MSME in India, they are 6 crores. And the percentage of the people who have availed this loan is, you can imagine the percentage which they have sent. So it means that a large number of units are still out of this purview. Why? Because out of the 6 crores, 99% come under micro. And most of the micro units in our country, they have no access to the institutional finance. Because of the typical nature of their working, they are not in corporate sector. They don't have, they are not able to meet the paper requirements of the banks for which financing is required. Plus, most of the banks, PSUs or the private sector banks, they lack severely, which I say, the last mile connectivity to these micro units. They cater to mostly the small or the medium-sized enterprises, mostly. So unless something is done to address the this sector, especially the micro sector, who was largely dependent on private lenders or NBFCs. NBFCs for the last 2-3 years are themselves in a very badly managed condition and gone out of the business. So there is a huge gap, and these people have nobody to fall back. So they are getting into the trap of the private lending. And if you see the financial stress which has been discussed here, it is not only the corona. MSME sector was always in a financial stress mode.
Yes.
So earlier what was happening, the business was rolling. So the funds were rolling, you were getting the payments and then you were paying to the raw material guy and something was happening. But now with this pandemic, when the value chain stopped, so lack of orders is another factor. The money which is stuck, the payments are not coming on time. So they are in a trap. So the government we appreciate whatever government try to do. Government is sincerely trying hard, but the structure of financing is like that, which where it's not reaching to the people who genuinely need money or who are in the badly need of the money. So the bankers, they have to come up with some solution how we can reach to this section of the society.
Mr. Rao, I want to come to you on one point where Mr. Saxena is saying that, the reach is not so much, we're not being able to reach all the corners. Are you seeing more and more the role of technology in that?
Absolutely true. In fact, all the digital initiatives which have been taken date back to something like November 2018, when SIDBI came with this online PSP portal, where the concept was the person who is seeking a loan without having the need to walk into a branch should get the access to sanction of loans. With this intention, various categories of loans specifically for MSMEs have been brought under this portal. The entire idea is to enable people who are there at their respective locations to have options of credit, available to them at one single location. So the beneficiaries have the option of choosing the branch and the bank, and then they can negotiate with regard to the interest rates, etc. As Mr. Saxena has rightly pointed out, we need to look at reducing the processing time, the interest costs. All these things are a factor by which the credit access is brought to the MSMEs. This is one digital initiative which SIDBI has taken. And secondly, very recently, I can give you the example of the PM SVANidhi scheme, for which street vendors have been provided with assistance of rupees 10,000 rupees to meet their quoting this particular scheme only because of the reasons that the technology is playing. In fact, to get the street vendors data itself is a challenging thing. But SIDBI, in association with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, has designed a particular platform whereby the certificates issued by the local bodies for the street vendors, everything have been digitalized. And as we speak today, more than 150,000 applications have been sanctioned under this lowest pyramid for which the financial support is required.
Mr. Khichi, I wanted to get you in now on this, just taking this discussion one step ahead. Is there some cooperation that you feel that maybe banks, NBFCs, fintechs, companies can come together to collaborate so that the end user, your MSME consumer, is benefited somewhere?
Yes, when Mr. Saxena was talking about almost 60 million MSMEs in the space here in the country, and we being able to finance to only around 4 million of them under this guaranteed emergency credit line, and that is so because this is only 20% of the fund-based working capital and the term loan outstanding as on 29. That means they were already having a banking arrangement with us. What Mr. Saxena is talking about, those MSMEs, those micro units, which are not having any banking relation with in any other thing. So what Mr. Rao is talking about, he gave an example of PM SVANidhi. Now we are targeting around 50 lakh vendors across the country. So that is around 50 lakh means 5 million. Another 5 million we will be able to cater to. And that is one place where we actually thought that unless and until we go digital, it may be very difficult to reach the micro units of this type which do not have any formal banking relation. And that is why what you're talking about, a collaboration with the banking correspondents to reach the entire spectrum of ecosystem of the street vendors, and collaborating with fintechs to basically look end to end, straight through process digitally. And that is what Bank of Baroda has actually done. We have, I think, the first bank and the only bank who has taken this particular journey entirely end to end, including your e-signing of the documents, the underwriting, the disbursement, the opening of accounts, everything as digital.
I completely allude to what Mr. Saxena was saying, but I completely agree with what Mr. Rao and Mr. Khichi said. As technology improves and as more and more micro enterprises also start creating a digital trail, you will find that there will be things which banks can pick up to assess the credit. Today, that is the challenge. Yeah, a lot of them, like Mr. Khichi was saying, out of 60 million, only 4.5 million bank. The rest of them don't really have a strong digital trail to catch. People are using analytics, like Mr. Khichi again said, analytics is getting used to process loans. And that is what is going to happen as you move to lower ticket size loans. And I think trend which we are finding post the COVID related challenges, as we are finding, a lot of new borrowers are first time borrowers are coming looking to borrow. And these are people who otherwise were unbanked. And we are finding that a lot of applications are coming in from people who are otherwise unbanked and they are first time borrowers in the banking system. So they may not have a civil related trail, but they have other trail at a personal level, which you can use to provide loans. So I'm pretty positive in terms of how things are moving. At least every week is looking better than the earlier one to some extent.
So fantastic. Well, that's good to hear.
Mr. Kothari, just what you said. So you rightly said lots of people will have to onboard on the digital thing. But with those micro units, you actually don't expect them to be digitally savvy and do it. So the other thing that as a banker that we thought was, will let us take them to this digital journey through assisted mode. And that is where our banking correspondent try to bring in and build in so that these digital journeys are carried on an assisted mode that becomes a little more easier for them.
So micro, small, medium enterprises are also quite agile. So are you seeing them, adopt new business model, new businesses? Is something what like the Prime Minister's Atmanirbhar initiative? Do you see that somewhere helping units in India to make the most of that so that they can, claw back on the growth?
You see what is happening. This is happening in the clusters because on its own, this most of the small units, they don't have access to the new technologies and new better work culture or better work practices. So what is happening, which we are seeing a good trend, that a lot of clusters are coming up, and these clusters are jointly negotiating some consultants or some new technology. And FISME is doing a good role in that. We are coordinating with them, like in defense. The government has recently allowed for MSMEs. So we have tied up with KPMG as a FISME. And we are taking to the industrial clusters who want to become a part of this journey, where we tell them we get them the technology transfer, we tell them how to produce it and how to approach for supplying or become a registered vendor with the Defense Ministry. So these things are definitely, we are seeing this is happening now because people are trying to look for a new technology.
Mr. Rao, the way ahead. While the stimulus has been given by the government and it's being put into place, but that's just one-time impact. I mean, how can we, because let's be honest, there are reports coming in from different quarters where saying that this pandemic is not, fizzling out really soon. The impact will last for a while. So what's the outlook for the way ahead? What more can banks do to handhold MSMEs so that help them get out of this troubles?
Yeah, see, this is almost a kind of a continuous working with the MSMEs because one, the stimulus package announced by the ministry under various programs like the emergency credit guarantee, then the other facilities like PM SVANidhi, etc. These will definitely help. In fact, just Mr. Saxena was referring to and Kothari Sahab was referring to, the ability of the MSMEs to quickly adapt to the changing times. See the number of PPE kits which are getting manufactured now, which was virtually zero some 5 or 6 months back, and the numbers in lakhs, that itself shows the potential of the MSMEs to wake up to the emerging requirements. So I have no doubt in my mind that with the support, and of course there are many things which are happening, technology is playing its part, there are hand-holding agencies, there are certified counselors, many things are in place. With these measures, I believe that MSMEs will play a significant part in going all the way in terms of promoting the economy, in terms of the exports, everything, whatever is expected of the MSMEs, I am confident that they will be able to do within the ecosystem of getting the financial support from the banks, both public sector, private sector, foreign banks, and we have seen entire financial ecosystem is there to take care and to address their requirements. Yeah.
Fantastic. Mr. Khichi, so what in your view is the way ahead, maybe the next 2-3 years? What does it look like for lending to MSMEs, and if we were for the MSMEs that are out there watching us, for them borrowing from the banks, from other institutions? Just what's your view for the way ahead?
Urban demand, yes, I expect that to be a little muted this year, with some sectors like aviation, travel, hospitality, and all leisure, or maybe the discretionary spending sectors may see a muted growth. But the rural demand is robust, and that in July itself, if you see the tractor growth, so it's around 36%. And food grain production increase, it's around expected to be in the range of around anywhere between 3.5 to 4% increase. So things in the rural side are good, and I think going forward, the MSME sector should also be looking up, more particularly your FMCG, your retail, and other things dealing that. So I am optimistic. I am very hopeful that by Q4, which the things should be looking up, and things should be in the positive territory.
Fantastic. Mr. Kothari, your thoughts? So for the way ahead, same question, the next 2 years, 3 years, or even if you want to take a guess for the next 1 year, just what your thoughts would be.
No, so I'm equally positive. I believe that the perseverance of the human race to manage a problem and come out stronger, and so also the entrepreneurial's will to make things happen is very strong. And I'm pretty positive that not only people alter their business models or figure out better break-evens to manage profits even at lower capacity utilizations. I guess when your backs are against the wall, you figure out a way. And I'm quite sure that entrepreneurs will also figure out a way to become profitable, to figure out business segments that are relevant for them, and capture new opportunities that come their way. And in my view, I think banks are also stepping up in a big way, whether it is from the point of view of going digital. In terms of Mr. Khichi talked about end-to-end processing, and I can tell you the entire emergency credit loan scheme, we have gone digital in terms of managing the entire documentation, right from request letter that comes from the customer to the documentation signing. Everything was digital. Now this was the first time we managed something like that, and we believe that this is giving an indication of times to come. We are using analytics in a big way in our bank, and more and more, I believe that as customers also become more digitally savvy, they will leave appropriate data for banks to use to come out with ways and means to assess their credit requirements, assess their credit scores, and go out and lend and manage the entire thing in a manner which is cost effective, and hence the reach will automatically start going up.
Mr. Saxena, just your final thoughts, the way ahead for the MSME sector. How do you envision it for the next few quarters?
In India, traditionally, the festival season, when it starts, the demand starts picking up. That's how we want to see how the Q3 goes. And if the Q3 is able to, at least sustain that, and then we see a growth coming in Q4. So we are hopeful that, as Mr. Khichi said, we also feel the worst is over. And confidence of the people is coming back, which we are seeing. Earlier, people were very scared of this scenario. But now that comfort level is coming back. We are seeing people are coming, working, they started opening. So I'm sure that by the time we reach end of this financial year, we should be in better position to know how the future looks.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Saxena. Thank you, Mr. Kothari. Thank you, Mr. Rao. And thank you, Mr. Khichi, for coming on this panel and for talking to us on what your expectation, what your thoughts are on the way ahead. Thank you so much to the viewers for watching this very special episode of Empowering the Ecosystem, presented by Bank of Baroda in partnership with ET Now. We hope we've been able to get you some great insights on how the way ahead looks like for the MSME sector, and how the banking system can go hand in hand and is trying to help bolster this very important sector. So thank you so much for watching.